The moment my wife shoved me away from her at the company party, I knew our marriage was over. Not because of the physical rejection, though that stung like hell, but because of the satisfied smirk on her sister Lindsay's face as she watched it happen. "Don't touch me, John," Marissa hissed loud enough for half the bar to hear. Her architectural firm's annual celebration was in full swing. All chrome fixtures and exposed brick. The kind of trendy downtown spot where a beer costs $12 and everyone pretends to enjoy it. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I'd only tried to put my arm around her waist, a simple gesture between husband and wife. Instead, she'd recoiled like I'd slapped her, sending me stumbling backward into a cocktail table. "Jesus, Marissa," I muttered, steadying myself. "What's gotten into you?" But she was already turning away, her perfectly styled blonde hair catching the industrial lighting as she rejoined her business partner, Scott, near the bar. Scott Slick Randall, as I'd started calling him in my head. Mid-30s, expensive suit, the kind of guy who probably used hair gel that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. Lindsay appeared at my elbow like she'd been waiting for this moment. "Bad night?" she asked, but there was something else in her voice. Add anticipation, maybe. I forced a smile, watching my wife laugh at something Scott whispered in her ear. "Last one, actually." That got Lindsay's attention. Her dark eyes, so different from Marissa's blue ones, though they shared the same sharp cheekbones, narrowed slightly. "What do you mean?" Before I could answer, I caught sight of Marissa's hand resting on Scott's forearm. Not a casual touch. Something intimate, possessive. The way she used to touch me back when we were happy. Back when she didn't flinch every time I came near her. "I need some air," I said, pushing through the crowd toward the exit. The October night was crisp, cutting through the haze of anger and humiliation clouding my thoughts. I leaned against my truck, a 10-year-old Ford F-150 that looked like a rust bucket next to the BMWs and Mercedes filling the parking lot, and tried to process what I'd just witnessed. 22 years. That's how long Marissa and I had been together. High school sweethearts who'd somehow made it through college, career changes, and the slow erosion of dreams that comes with middle age. I'd supported her through architecture school, working double shifts at the construction company to keep us afloat. When she'd finally landed her dream job and started making real money, I'd been genuinely proud. Maybe that was my mistake. Maybe I should have seen the signs when she started working late every night. When she stopped talking about her day, when she moved into the guest bedroom because my snoring kept her awake. My phone buzzed. A text from Marty, my best friend, who ran an auto repair shop across town. "How's the fancy party? You wearing that tie I told you to buy?" I looked down at the navy blue tie Marissa had picked out for me 3 Christmases ago. The same one I wore to every company function, every wedding, every occasion that required me to look presentable for her colleagues. Instead of responding to Marty, I scrolled through my recent calls until I found the number I'd been avoiding for weeks. Dave Morrison, a private investigator who'd done some work for my construction company when we'd had issues with employee theft. "Dave, it's John Doyle. I need to talk. Little late for a business call, isn't it? This isn't business, it's personal." A pause. How personal. I watched through the bar's windows as Marissa threw her head back, laughing at something Scott had said. His hand was on the small of her back now, fingers spread possessively. "The kind that ends marriages. Meet me at my office tomorrow morning. 9 sharp, and John, bring cash." I hung up and stared at my reflection in the truck's side mirror. 43 years old, graying at the temples, laugh lines that had turned into worry lines somewhere along the way. When had I become the kind of man my wife was embarrassed to be seen with the bar door opened and Lindsay stepped out, wrapping her arms around herself against the cold? She'd always been the wilder sister. Tattoos peeking out from her sleeves, dark hair cut in an asymmetrical bob that somehow looked effortlessly cool. Where Marissa was all sharp angles and calculated perfection, Lindsay was curves and chaos. "You okay out here?" she asked, approaching my truck. "Peachy?" she laughed, a sound nothing like Marissa's practiced social giggle. "You're a terrible liar, John Doyle." "Yeah, well, I'm learning that's not always a bad thing." Lindsay studied my face in the dim parking lot lighting. "You saw it too, didn't you?" The way she looked at him. I didn't answer, but I didn't need to. Lindsay had always been perceptive, even as a kid. 3 years younger than Marissa, but somehow always the one who saw through the family's polite facades. "She's been different lately," Lindsay continued. "Distant even with me." "When did it start?" I asked, surprising myself with the question. The distance or the affair? The word hung between us like a loaded gun. Affair. I'd been dancing around it in my head for weeks, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real. Both. Lindsay leaned against my truck close enough that I could smell her perfume, something warm and spicy. Nothing like Marissa's expensive floral scents. The distance started about 6 months ago, right around the time Scott joined the firm as a partner. The affair? She shrugged. That's newer. Maybe 2 months. How do you know? Because she used to tell me everything. Every fight you two had, every problem at work, every stupid thing that bothered her. Then she just stopped. And when someone stops talking about their problems, it usually means they've found someone else to talk to. Through the window, I could see Marissa and Scott deep in conversation at a corner table. Their heads were close together and Scott's hand covered hers on the table. "I should go back in there," I said. "Confront them, and give her the moral high ground. Let her paint you as the jealous, controlling husband." Lindsay shook her head. "Marissa's always been good at playing the victim. Don't hand her the ammunition." "So, what do you suggest?" "Pretend I don't know." Lindsay was quiet for a long moment, staring at the bar's neon sign. "You know what she used to say about you back when you were dating?" I shook my head. "She said you were too nice, too trusting. She actually worried that other women would take advantage of you because you always saw the best in people." Lindsay's laugh was bitter. "Funny how things change. Maybe I should have been less trusting. Maybe she should have been more grateful." The bar door opened again, and a group of Marissa's colleagues spilled out, laughing and chatting as they headed to their cars. I recognized most of them. People I'd made small talk with at company barbecues and holiday parties. People who probably knew about the affair before I did. "I should go," I said, pulling my keys from my pocket. John Lindsay's hand touched my arm, stopping me. "Whatever you're thinking of doing, be smart about it. Marissa's not the same person you married. She's harder now, more calculating. If you come at her head on, she'll destroy you." I looked down at her hand on my arm, then back at her face. In the neon light, she looked younger than her 37 years. Vulnerable in a way Marissa hadn't been in years. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you deserve better. You always have." Before I could respond, she was walking back toward the bar, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the growing certainty that my marriage was beyond saving. I drove home through empty streets, my mind racing with possibilities. Confrontation, counseling, divorce. Each option felt like stepping off a cliff into unknown territory. Our house was dark when I pulled into the driveway. A modest 2-story colonial in a middle-class neighborhood, nothing like the sleek downtown loft Marissa had been eyeing in real estate magazines. She'd called our home quaint when talking to her colleagues, and I'd pretended not to hear the condescension in her voice. Inside, I poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon and sat in my recliner. The one piece of furniture Marissa hadn't replaced during her redecorating phase last year. The house felt different now, like a stage set rather than a home. Everything perfectly arranged, nothing out of place, no signs of the life we'd built together. I thought about Dave Morrison's words. Bring cash. How much did it cost to confirm your worst suspicions? How much to document the end of everything you thought you knew about your life? My phone buzzed with a text from Marissa. Staying at Lindsay's tonight. Too much wine to drive. I stared at the message knowing it was a lie. Lindsay had been at the bar when I left and she'd been stone sober, which meant Marissa was somewhere else with someone else. I finished my bourbon and headed upstairs to our bedroom. Her side of the bed was already cold, sheets pulled tight in that way that said she hadn't planned on coming home. In her nightstand drawer, buried under old magazines and charging cables, I found what I was looking for. A second phone. An iPhone I'd never seen before, still warm from recent use. My hands shook as I powered it on. No lock screen. Marissa had always been careless about security. The text messages loaded and my worst fears were confirmed in a string of conversations that made my stomach turn. Scott, can't wait to have you all to myself tonight. Marissa, John's getting suspicious. We need to be more careful, Scott. Or you could just leave him. You know you want to. Marissa, it's complicated. The house, the finances. I need time to figure things out. Scott, I'm tired of sneaking around. You're better than this suburban housewife act. The messages went back months. Intimate details about their relationship, cruel observations about our marriage, plans for a future that didn't include me. But it was the last exchange that broke something inside me. Marissa, he tried to touch me tonight, made my skin crawl. Scott, soon you won't have to pretend anymore. I set the phone down carefully, my hands surprisingly steady now. The hurt was still there, sharp and immediate. But it was being overtaken by something else, something colder and more focused. 22 years of marriage, 22 years of supporting her dreams, making sacrifices, being the dependable husband while she climbed the social ladder. And this was how it ended, with secret phones and cruel laughter and plans made behind my back. I looked around our bedroom, taking inventory. Her jewelry box on the dresser, the expensive clothes in her walk-in closet, the framed photos of us from happier times, now feeling like evidence of a lie I'd been living. But I wasn't going to be the victim in this story. Not anymore. I put the phone back exactly where I'd found it and went to my computer. If Marissa wanted to play games, I'd show her what a real game looked like. Dave Morrison's office smelled like stale coffee and broken dreams. Located above a pawn shop on the wrong side of downtown, it was exactly what you'd expect from a private investigator who advertised on bus benches and took cash payments. Adultery cases are bread and butter, Dave said, leaning back in a chair that squeaked with every movement. He was a thin man in his 50s with the kind of weathered face that suggested he'd seen too much of humanity's worst impulses. Question is, what do you want to accomplish? I slid an envelope across his desk. $5,000 in cash withdrawn from my personal account. Money I'd been saving for a fishing boat. I want proof, photos, documents, whatever it takes to show she's been cheating. And then what? You planning to divorce her? I'm planning to make sure she doesn't get to play the victim when I do. Dave opened the envelope and counted the bills with practiced efficiency. Your wife works at Henderson and Associates, right? The architecture firm downtown. You know it. I know Scott Randall's got a reputation. This isn't his first time mixing business with pleasure. Dave pulled out a yellow legal pad and started taking notes. Tell me about their schedules, when they're together, where they go, any patterns you've noticed. For the next hour, I laid out everything I'd observed over the past few months. The late nights at the office, the weekend site visits that couldn't be verified, the way Marissa had started dressing differently, buying new lingerie she never wore around me. She's got a second phone, I added. iPhone, probably a burner. She keeps it in her nightstand. Dave's eyebrows went up. You go through it once last night after the party where she made it clear she didn't want me touching her. What did you find? I recounted the text messages, watching Dave's expression grow more interested with each detail. By the time I finished, he was nodding approvingly. She's sloppy, overconfident. That works in our favor. He tapped his pen against the pad. I can have preliminary evidence within a week. Full documentation within 2, but I need to ask, you sure you want to go down this road? Sometimes it's better not to know the details. I already know the details. I just need proof other people will believe. Dave studied my face for a long moment. You're not planning anything stupid, are you? Because I don't work with clients who nothing illegal, I interrupted. I just want to make sure when this marriage ends, everyone knows who really destroyed it. Fair enough. Dave stood and walked to a filing cabinet, pulling out a standard contract. I'll need you to sign this retainer agreement, confidentiality clause, the usual legal protections. As I signed the papers, Dave continued talking. Your wife's sister, Lindsay, right? She know about any of this. She suspects. Why? Might be useful to have someone on the inside, someone who can confirm schedules, overhear conversations, family members see things outsiders miss. I thought about Lindsay's hand on my arm the night before. The way she'd looked at me with something that might have been sympathy or something else entirely. I'll think about it. Don't think too long. In my experience, cheaters get careless when they think they're not being watched, but they get paranoid fast once they suspect surveillance. I left Dave's office with a mixture of anticipation and dread. The investigation was in motion now, which meant there was no going back. In 2 weeks, I'd have legal proof of what I already knew in my gut. The question was what I'd do with it. My phone rang as I was walking to my truck. Marissa's name on the caller ID. Where are you? She asked without preamble. Running errands? Why? I need you to pick up my dry cleaning, the blue dress for the Hartwell presentation tomorrow. The same tone she'd used to ask me to take out the trash. No, please. No, thank you, just an assumption that I'd drop everything to handle her needs. I'm across town. Can't you get it yourself? A pause. I'm at the office. We're swamped with the Hartwell project, and Scott needs me too. Scott needs you. I let the words hang there. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. I'll get your dress. I hung up before she could respond, already imagining the conversation she'd have with Scott about her difficult husband. Let them think I was clueless. Let them get comfortable with their deception while Dave Morrison documented every lie. The dry cleaner was a small family operation run by an elderly Korean couple who'd known Marissa and me for years. Mrs. Kim smiled when she saw me coming. Mr. John, here for Mrs. Marissa's dress. That's right. She disappeared into the back room, returning with a garment bag containing a navy blue sheath dress I'd never seen before. Expensive by the look of it. The kind of thing Marissa wore when she wanted to make an impression. She looked very beautiful in this dress, Mrs. Kim said, handing me the bag. Very elegant lady, your wife. Yeah, I agreed, she's something special. But as I drove home, I found myself thinking about Lindsay instead. The way she'd looked in her simple black dress at the party. No designer labels or calculated elegance, just natural beauty and genuine warmth. When had I stopped noticing things like that about my own wife? The house was empty when I arrived. Marissa's car absent from the driveway. I hung her dress in the bedroom closet and checked her nightstand drawer. The second phone was gone. Smart. She was getting more careful, just as Dave had predicted, but not careful enough to avoid a professional investigator with 20 years of experience catching cheaters. I made myself a sandwich and ate it standing at the kitchen counter, looking out at the backyard where Marissa and I had once talked about putting in a garden. We'd never gotten around to it. always too busy with work or social obligations or the dozens of small compromises that had slowly eroded our connection. My phone buzzed with a text from Marty. "Beer tonight? Jenny's working late and I'm going stir crazy." I hesitated. Marty had been my best friend since high school, but he was also friends with Marissa. If I told him about the investigation, would he keep it to himself? Or would loyalty to both of us force him to warn her? "Rain check," I texted back. "Dealing with some stuff at home. Everything okay? We'll be soon." I spent the rest of the afternoon researching divorce lawyers online, making notes about asset division and alimony calculations. Marissa made more money than me now, which meant I might actually come out ahead financially. The irony wasn't lost on me. Her success, which had driven us apart, might also be what saved me from poverty in the aftermath. She came home at 7:30 carrying takeout from an expensive Italian restaurant downtown, the same place she'd taken me for my birthday 3 years ago, back when she still made an effort to celebrate our relationship. "Sorry I'm late," she said, setting the bags on the kitchen counter. "The Hartwell presentation is tomorrow, and we wanted to make sure everything was perfect. We, the team, Scott, myself, a few of the junior architects." She avoided my eyes as she spoke, busying herself with unpacking containers of pasta and salad. "How's Scott working out as a partner?" "Fine, he's very dedicated." I watched her face as she said it, looking for tells, a slight flush in her cheeks the way she touched her neck when she lied. All the little habits I'd learned over 22 years of marriage. Must be nice having someone who shares your vision. "Yes, it is." She looked at me directly now, and I saw something challenging in her expression. "It's important to have a partner who understands your ambitions, who wants the same things you want. And what do you want, Marissa?" The question seemed to catch her off guard. She paused with a fork full of pasta halfway to her mouth, studying my face. "I want to be successful. I want to build something meaningful. I want," she trailed off, shaking her head. "I want to matter. And you don't think you matter now? Not the way I should, not the way I could with the right support." The implication was clear. I wasn't the right support. I was the anchor holding her back from whatever life she imagined with Scott Randall. "I see," I said quietly. We ate the rest of our dinner in silence, two strangers sharing a meal in a house that no longer felt like home. Marissa went to bed early, claiming exhaustion from work stress. I stayed up until midnight, making plans and waiting for the investigation to begin in earnest. The next morning, I watched from the kitchen window as Marissa got into her car wearing the blue dress I'd picked up from the dry cleaner. She looked beautiful, confident, ready to conquer the world, ready to present her vision of the future to the Hartwell clients with Scott by her side. I wondered if she'd worn that dress for the presentation or for him. My phone rang at 10:00 a.m. "Dave Morrison. I've got eyes on them," he said without preamble. "Your wife and Randall just checked into the Marriott downtown, room 412. Want me to get photos?" I closed my eyes, feeling the last of my illusions crumble. "Get everything. You got it. And John, I'm sorry. I know this isn't easy." "No," I agreed, "but it's necessary." I hung up and poured myself another cup of coffee, my hands steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. Phase 1 was complete. Now it was time to start planning Phase 2. The photos arrived by email 3 days later, and they were everything Dave Morrison had promised. High-resolution images of Marissa and Scott entering the Marriott together, kissing in the hotel bar. Scott's hand on her thigh under the restaurant table. Marissa laughing at something he'd whispered in her ear, her face radiant with the kind of happiness I hadn't seen from her in years. But it was the final photo that broke something fundamental inside me. Marissa and Scott on the hotel room balcony, her arms wrapped around his neck, both of them naked from the waist up. The same balcony where we'd stayed for our 15th wedding anniversary, back when she still pretended to love me. I printed the photos on my home computer, hands shaking with rage and something else. Relief. Maybe that the uncertainty was finally over. No more wondering if I was paranoid or imagining things. No more making excuses for her behavior or blaming myself for our failing marriage. My phone rang. Lindsay's name on the caller ID. "Hey," she said, her voice unusually subdued. "Are you busy? I need to talk to someone." "What's wrong?" "It's about Marissa. Can I come over?" 20 minutes later, Lindsay was sitting at my kitchen table. Her dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, wearing jeans and a sweater that made her look younger than her 37 years. She'd been crying, I realized. Her eyes were red-rimmed and she kept twisting a tissue between her fingers. "She told me," Lindsay said without preamble, "about Scott, about the affair." I set a cup of coffee in front of her, my expression carefully neutral. "What did she say?" "That she's in love with him, that she's been miserable for years and finally found someone who makes her happy." Lindsay looked up at me, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "She asked me to help her figure out how to leave you." "And what did you tell her?" "I told her she was making the biggest mistake of her life." Lindsay wrapped her hands around the coffee mug, staring down at the dark liquid. "She's changed, John. I don't know when it happened, but she's not the sister I grew up with anymore. She's become this cold, calculating person who only cares about status and money and impressing people who don't matter. People change. Not like this. Not this completely." Lindsay looked up at me again. "She talked about you like you were some kind of burden she'd been carrying around. Like 22 years of marriage meant nothing." I pulled out the manila envelope containing Dave's photos and set it on the table between us. "She's not wrong about one thing. The marriage is over." Lindsay stared at the envelope like it might explode. "What's that?" "Proof." She opened the envelope with trembling fingers, her face going pale as she flipped through the images. By the time she reached the balcony photo, tears were streaming down her cheeks. "Oh, John, I'm so sorry. Don't be sorry, be angry." Lindsay set the photos down and wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to make sure everyone knows the truth, starting with her parents. Her parents worship her. They'll never believe. They'll believe photographic evidence." Lindsay was quiet for a long moment, studying my face. "You're different too. Harder. I can see it in your eyes. 22 years of marriage will do that to a man, especially when it ends like this. It doesn't have to end. You could fight for her. Try counseling with a woman who finds my touch repulsive, who's been planning her exit strategy for months while pretending everything was fine." I shook my head. "Some things can't be fixed, Lindsay. Some betrayals are too deep." She reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. Her skin was warm, her touch gentle in a way I'd almost forgotten existed. "You deserve better than this." "Do I? Maybe this is exactly what I deserve. Maybe I was too complacent, too trusting, too willing to let her drift away without fighting for what we had." "Stop it." Lindsay's voice was fierce. "Don't you dare blame yourself for her choices. You're a good man, John Doyle. You always have been. If she can't see that, it's her loss." I looked down at our joined hands, feeling something shift in the space between us. Something that had been building since the night of the company party, maybe longer. "Lindsay, I know." She pulled her hand back, her cheeks flushing. "I'm sorry, this isn't the time or place, isn't it?" The question hung between us, loaded with possibilities neither of us was quite ready to acknowledge. Lindsay stood abruptly, pacing to the kitchen window. "She's my sister. Despite everything, she's still my sister, and she's still my wife for now." Lindsay turned back to me, her expression conflicted. "What do you need from me?" "The truth. When she asks you to help her plan her exit, I want to know about it. When she tells you about her future with Scott, I want details. When she starts moving money or making arrangements, you want me to spy on her. I want you to protect yourself because when this all comes out, she's going to blame everyone except herself. And family members make convenient scapegoats. Lindsay considered this, her gaze drifting back to the photos scattered on the table. She really thinks she's going to get away with this, doesn't she? That she can just walk away and start over with Scott like the last 22 years never happened. That's exactly what she thinks. Then she's forgotten who she's dealing with. Lindsay's smile was sharp, almost predatory. You might be too nice for your own good, John, but you're not stupid and you're definitely not weak. No, I agreed, I'm not. That evening, Marissa came home late again, full of apologies and explanations about client meetings and project deadlines. She kissed my cheek, a brief, perfunctory gesture that felt like a lie against my skin, and disappeared upstairs to shower. I listened to the water running and imagined her washing Scott's scent from her body, preparing to play the role of faithful wife for another night. The performance was flawless, I had to admit. If I hadn't seen the photos, hadn't read the text messages, I might have believed her act indefinitely. My phone buzzed with a text from Dave Morrison. More photos tomorrow. They're getting sloppy. Good. Let them get comfortable. Let them think they were smarter than the boring husband who worked construction and drove an old truck. Let them underestimate me right up until the moment I destroyed their perfect little fantasy. Marissa emerged from the bathroom wearing a silk nightgown I'd bought her last Christmas. She'd never worn it before, claiming it was too fancy for every day. Apparently, guilt made her sentimental. "How was your day?" she asked, settling into bed beside me. "Fine, quiet." "Good. You work too hard. You should take some time for yourself. Maybe plan a fishing trip with Marty." Translation: Please leave town so I can spend more time with my lover without having to sneak around. Maybe I will. She smiled and kissed me again, this time on the lips. It lasted exactly 3 seconds and felt like kissing a stranger. "I love you," she said, the words automatic and empty. "I love you too." The lie came easily now. We were both actors in a play neither of us believed in anymore, going through the motions until one of us found the courage to drop the curtain. But I wasn't planning to just drop the curtain. I was planning to burn down the entire theater. I waited until Marissa's breathing evened out beside me, then slipped out of bed and went to my computer. Dave's preliminary report was already in my email, along with a detailed timeline of the affair and financial records showing Scott's pattern of dating and discarding his business partners. Marissa wasn't his first victim, she wasn't even his second. Scott Randall had a history of seducing successful women, using their resources to advance his career, then moving on to the next opportunity. The only difference was that this time he'd picked a married woman with assets worth fighting for. I spent the next 2 hours researching divorce law and asset protection strategies. By the time I finally went back to bed, I had a plan that would ensure Marissa got exactly what she deserved and nothing more. The next morning, she was gone before I woke up, leaving only a note about an early client meeting and a lipstick kiss on the bathroom mirror that felt like mockery. I called in sick to work and drove to Lindsay's apartment across town. She answered the door in yoga pants and an oversized sweater, her hair still messy from sleep. "John, what are you doing here? I need your help." She stepped aside to let me in, and I found myself in a space that was everything our house wasn't. Warm, lived in, filled with books and plants and the kind of comfortable chaos that comes from actually enjoying your home. "Coffee," she offered. "Please." As she busied herself in the kitchen, I studied the photographs covering her refrigerator. Family pictures mostly, including several of Marissa and me from happier times. In one, we were laughing at something off camera. My arm around her waist, her head tilted against my shoulder. We looked like people who actually liked each other. "When was that taken?" Lindsay asked, following my gaze. "Your birthday party 3 years ago, remember? We had it at that restaurant by the lake. You were so happy that night, both of you. Yeah, well, things change. Lindsay handed me a mug of coffee and settled onto the couch beside me. What kind of help do you need? The kind that might damage your relationship with your sister permanently. She was quiet for a moment, studying my face. Tell me what you're thinking. I'm thinking Marissa has gotten comfortable lying to both of us. I'm thinking she believes she's smarter than everyone around her, including the husband she's planning to discard. And I'm thinking it's time she learned otherwise. You want revenge? I want justice. There's a difference. Lindsay curled her legs under her, wrapping her hands around her coffee mug. What would you need me to do? Be my eyes and ears. Tell me when she's planning to make her move. When she's meeting with lawyers, when she's moving money around, help me stay one step ahead of her. And in return, when this is over and the dust settles, you'll know you were on the right side, the side that valued honesty and loyalty over ambition and selfishness. Lindsay was quiet for a long time, staring into her coffee like it held answers to questions she wasn't sure she wanted to ask. She called me yesterday. She finally said, asked me to have lunch with her today. She wants to discuss family matters. Translation, she wants to start building her narrative for why the divorce is all my fault. Probably. So what are you going to tell her? Lindsay looked up at me, her dark eyes steady and determined. I'm going to tell her I'm listening, and then I'm going to tell you everything she says. Even if it hurts her, especially if it hurts her, because maybe if she faces some real consequences for once in her life, she'll remember who she used to be before she became this person I don't recognize. I reached over and squeezed her hand, feeling the warmth of her skin and the strength of her grip. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This is going to get ugly before it gets better. I'm counting on it. Lindsay's intelligence gathering proved more valuable than I dared hope. Over lunch at an upscale bistro downtown, Marissa had laid out her entire exit strategy with the casual confidence of someone who believed she held all the cards. She's planning to file for divorce next month. Lindsay reported that evening, sitting across from me at my kitchen table. She's already consulted with 3 different lawyers, looking for the one who will be most aggressive about asset division. What about the house? She wants to force a sale, split the proceeds 50-50, even though she's the one breaking up the marriage. Lindsay's voice was tight with anger. She actually said she deserved half of everything because she invested 22 years in this relationship. Invested. I let the word roll around in my mouth, tasting its bitterness. Like I was some kind of stock portfolio that didn't perform to her expectations. It gets worse. She's planning to claim emotional abuse. Says you've been psychologically controlling and that she's been afraid to leave because of your unpredictable temper. I sat down my beer carefully, my hands surprisingly steady despite the rage building in my chest. Emotional abuse. She's been documenting incidents, keeping a journal of every argument, every time you've raised your voice, every moment of tension between you two, but she's editing them, making herself the victim in every scenario. And Scott? Where does he fit into her master plan? Lindsay's expression darkened. They're planning to move in together as soon as the divorce is finalized. He's already looking at condos in the Arts District, places that match their sophisticated lifestyle. They want to be seen as the power couple of the architecture world. How romantic. There's more. Lindsay pulled out her phone and scrolled through what looked like text messages. She asked me to testify on her behalf to corroborate her claims about your controlling behavior and support her narrative about being trapped in an unhappy marriage. And what did you tell her? I told her I'd think about it. Lindsay looked up at me, her eyes blazing with indignation. John, she actually tried to coach me on what to say. She wanted me to lie under oath to help her steal half your assets and destroy your reputation. The kitchen fell silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic. I thought about the woman upstairs, probably texting with Scott about their bright future together, completely unaware that her carefully constructed plan was about to collapse around her. "She's forgotten something important," I said finally. "What's that?" "I know her better than anyone, including her weaknesses." Lindsay leaned forward, interested, such as Marissa has always needed to be the smartest person in the room. It's her greatest strength and her fatal flaw. She can't resist showing off, can't help but gloat when she thinks she's winning. I smiled, feeling something cold and satisfied settling in my chest. She's going to want to confront me directly to see the look on my face when she reveals how thoroughly she's outmaneuvered me. You think she'll confess? I think she'll do something even better. She'll try to make me feel small and stupid for not seeing it coming. She'll want to hurt me, to punish me for being the anchor that held her back from her glorious new life. And when she does, I'll be ready. We spent the next hour planning our counter-strategy. Lindsay would continue playing the supportive sister while feeding me information about Marissa's moves. I would maintain my facade of oblivious husband while Dave Morrison gathered more evidence and I prepared my own legal offensive. "There's something else," Lindsay said as she was getting ready to leave. "Something I probably shouldn't tell you. Tell me anyway." She said she never really loved you, that she married you because you were safe and reliable, but that she always knew she'd outgrow you eventually. Lindsay's voice was soft, apologetic. She said staying with you this long was the biggest mistake of her life. The words hit like physical blows, each one finding its target with surgical precision. 22 years of marriage dismissed as a mistake. 2 decades of love and support and shared dreams reduced to a calculation about safety and reliability. "I'm sorry," Lindsay whispered. "I shouldn't have." "Yes, you should have." I needed to hear it because now I knew exactly what I was dealing with. Not the woman I'd married, not even a stranger, but something worse. Someone who had actively despised me while pretending to love me. Someone who had been planning my destruction while sharing my bed. John. I looked up to find Lindsay watching me with concern, her dark eyes soft with sympathy I didn't deserve. "I'm okay," I said, and was surprised to find it was true. The hurt was there, sharp and immediate, but underneath it was something harder and more useful. "Clarity? Are you better than okay? For the first time in months, I know exactly where I stand." Lindsay moved closer, her hand reaching up to touch my cheek. "You don't have to go through this alone." The moment stretched between us, loaded with possibility and danger in equal measure. She was beautiful, I realized, not in Marissa's calculated way, but naturally, genuinely, and she was offering me something I hadn't felt in years, the sense that someone actually cared about my well-being. "Lindsay, I know. She's my sister. You're still married. The timing is terrible." Her hand was still on my cheek, her thumb tracing a line along my jaw. "But I can't pretend I don't have feelings for you. I've had them for years. If I'm being honest, years since before you and Marissa started having problems. Since back when I thought you were just the good guy who was too devoted to my sister for his own good." She smiled sadly. "I used to be jealous of her, you know. Not because of what she had, but because she had you and didn't seem to appreciate it." I covered her hand with mine, holding it against my face. "This is complicated. Everything worthwhile is complicated." Before I could talk myself out of it, I leaned down and kissed her. It was soft at first, tentative, a question more than a statement. But when she kissed me back, her arms sliding around my neck, it became something else entirely. Something desperate and hungry and completely different from the perfunctory kisses I'd been sharing with Marissa. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard. "That was," Lindsay started, "a mistake." "Perfect." I rested my forehead against hers, trying to process the emotions swirling through me. Guilt, desire, hope, fear, all tangled together in a knot I couldn't begin to unravel. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now you go upstairs to your wife and pretend nothing has changed. And I go home and pretend I'm not falling in love with my sister's husband. And tomorrow we keep playing our parts until it's time to drop the masks." She kissed me once more, quick and fierce, then was gone, leaving me alone in my kitchen with the taste of her lips and the knowledge that my marriage wasn't the only relationship about to be destroyed by the choices we were all making. I found Marissa in our bedroom, laptop open on her knees, working on what looked like architectural plans. She glanced up when I entered, her expression neutral. "How was your evening?" she asked. "Fine. Watched some TV, had a beer." "Good. You should relax more." The casual dismissal in her tone, as if my evening was so inconsequential it barely merited acknowledgement, crystallized something inside me. This was how she saw me now. Not as a partner or even an adversary, but as a minor inconvenience to be managed until she could discard me entirely. "Marissa," I said, sitting on the edge of the bed, "can I ask you something?" She looked up from her laptop, slightly annoyed at the interruption. "What? Are you happy?" The question seemed to catch her off guard. She closed the laptop and studied my face, probably trying to determine if this was some kind of trap. "That's a complicated question." "Not really. Either you're happy or you're not. I'm content most of the time. Content." I nodded slowly. "That's not the same thing as happy. Happiness is overrated. Contentment is more realistic for people our age." "Is it? Or is that just what we tell ourselves when we've given up on something better?" Marissa's eyes narrowed slightly. "What's this about, John? I've been thinking about us, about where we are, where we're going, whether this is really what either of us wants anymore." For a moment, I saw something flicker across her face. Surprise, maybe, or hope. The possibility that I might be offering her an easy exit from the marriage she was planning to destroy anyway. "And what conclusion have you reached?" she asked carefully. "I think we both deserve to be happy, really happy, not just content." "That's very philosophical of you. Maybe it's time to stop being philosophical and start being honest." The words hung between us like a challenge. This was her moment, her opportunity to come clean about Scott, about her plans, about the contempt she felt for our marriage. All she had to do was be brave enough to tell the truth. Instead, she opened her laptop again and returned to her architectural plans. "I'm too tired for deep conversations tonight," she said without looking up. "Can we table this for another time?" "Sure," I said, standing up. "Another time?" But as I headed for the bathroom to brush my teeth, I was already planning exactly when that other time would be. And when it came, Marissa was going to discover that her boring, reliable husband had learned a few things about strategy himself. The game was almost over. She just didn't know it yet. The final phase began on a Tuesday morning in November. Marissa left early for what she claimed was a breakfast meeting with potential clients. But Dave Morrison's surveillance confirmed she was actually meeting with her divorce lawyer to finalize the papers. According to Lindsay, who had become my most valuable intelligence asset, Marissa planned to serve me that evening, timing it for maximum psychological impact. She wanted to catch me off guard, vulnerable and unprepared. She wanted to see me crumble. Instead, I was ready. I'd taken the day off work, telling my crew I had personal business to handle. By 9 a.m., I was sitting in my lawyer's office, not some strip mall attorney, but Harrison Webb, one of the most respected family law practitioners in the state. The retainer had cost me $15,000, money I'd quietly moved from our joint savings account over the past month. "Mr. Doyle," Harrison said, reviewing the file I'd compiled with Dave Morrison's help, "this is quite comprehensive. Your wife's attorney is going to be very surprised. That's the idea." Harrison was a thin man in his 60s with silver hair and the kind of quiet confidence that comes from winning cases other lawyers wouldn't touch. His office walls were covered with degrees from Harvard and Yale, along with photographs of him shaking hands with judges and politicians. "The adultery evidence is solid," he continued, flipping through Dave's photographs. "The financial records showing her secret consultations with multiple attorneys demonstrate premeditation. And this journal she's been keeping fabricated evidence of abuse," I supplied. My sister-in-law photographed several pages before Marissa realized she was being watched. "Attempted fraud in a divorce proceeding. That's a serious charge." Harrison looked up at me over his reading glasses. "Are you sure you want to go nuclear on this? Sometimes a quiet settlement is less damaging for everyone involved." "Mr. Webb, my wife has spent months planning to destroy my reputation, steal half my assets, and paint me as an abusive husband to cover her own adultery. She's enlisted her lover, her family, and her friends in a conspiracy to defraud me in divorce court." I leaned forward in my chair. "I don't want a quiet settlement. I want justice. Justice can be expensive and messy. So can letting people think they can destroy your life without consequences." Harrison smiled, the first genuine expression I'd seen from him since entering his office. "In that case, let's give your wife the surprise of her life." The papers were filed by noon. While Marissa was having lunch with Scott, probably celebrating their imminent freedom, the process server was delivering a comprehensive countersuit that would turn her world upside down. Adultery, fraud, conspiracy, intentional infliction of emotional distress. I was seeking full custody of our assets, attorney's fees, and punitive damages that would leave her worse off than when we'd married. But the legal filing was just the opening move. The real revenge required a more personal touch. I spent the afternoon making phone calls to Marissa's parents, who deserved to know why their daughter's marriage was ending, to her colleagues at the architecture firm, who should understand what kind of person they were working with, to our mutual friends who had a right to hear the truth before Marissa could spin her version of events. Each conversation was difficult but necessary. I didn't editorialize or embellish. I simply shared the facts backed up by photographic evidence that spoke for itself. The reactions ranged from shock to anger to disappointment, but no one questioned the authenticity of what I was showing them. By 4:00 p.m., Marissa's carefully constructed reputation was in ruins. Lindsay called at 5:30, her voice tight with excitement and apprehension. "She knows," Lindsay said. "Her lawyer called her an hour ago. She's been screaming and crying and throwing things around her office. Scott's with her, trying to calm her down." "How long before she gets home?" "She left the office 10 minutes ago. John, she's furious. I've never seen her this angry." "Good. Anger makes people sloppy. Be careful. I know my sister, and when she's cornered, she gets vicious. So do I." I hung up and took one last look around the house we'd shared for 15 years. The living room where we'd watched movies together, the kitchen where we'd cooked dinner and talked about our days, the bedroom where we'd made love and shared our dreams for the future. All of it felt like ancient history now, artifacts from someone else's life. Marissa's car pulled into the driveway at 6:15, the engine revving aggressively as she parked. I heard the front door slam, followed by the sharp click of her heels on the hardwood floor. "John!" she screamed from the foyer. "Where are you in here?" I called from the living room, my voice calm and steady. She appeared in the doorway like an avenging angel, her face flushed with rage, her usually perfect hair disheveled from running her hands through it. In her right hand, she clutched a copy of the legal papers I'd had served. "What the hell is this?" she demanded, waving the documents in the air. "Divorce papers? I thought you'd be familiar with the concept since you've been planning to serve me with your own version tonight." That stopped her cold for a moment. Confusion replaced anger on her face. "How did you know about your plans?" Know about Scott? Know about the journal full of lies you've been writing to support your fraud case? I stood up slowly, enjoying the way her eyes widened with each revelation. Marissa, I've known about everything for weeks. That's impossible. I was careful. You were sloppy. Did you really think you could carry on an affair in a small city without someone noticing? Did you honestly believe you could plot against me for months without word getting back? She sank into the chair across from me, the fight temporarily draining out of her as the scope of her exposure became clear. Who told you? Does it matter? The important thing is that everyone knows now. Your parents, your colleagues, our friends, they all know what you really are. What I really am. The anger was returning, her voice rising to a near shriek. I'm a woman who was trapped in a dead marriage with a man who never understood me, never supported my dreams, never gave me the life I deserved, the life you deserved. I nodded thoughtfully. You're right about that. Actually, you deserve exactly what you're going to get. Which is what? I pulled out my phone and showed her the screen, a bank statement showing our joint accounts had been frozen pending the divorce proceedings. No access to marital assets until the court determines how they should be divided. Given your adultery and attempted fraud, I'm guessing that won't work out in your favor. Her face went white. You can't do that. I already did. I also had the locks changed on the house, which the court has awarded to me as temporary separate property. You'll need to find somewhere else to stay. This is my house, too. Was past tense. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the neighborhood where we'd planned to grow old together. You know what's funny, Marissa? If you'd just been honest with me, if you'd come to me 6 months ago and said you wanted a divorce, I probably would have given you half of everything without a fight. Then why? Because you didn't just want a divorce. You wanted to destroy me. You wanted to paint me as the villain while you rode off into the sunset with your lover, taking half my assets and leaving me with a reputation as an abusive husband. I turned back to face her. You wanted to win, not just leave. I did win. I found someone who loves me, who appreciates me. Scott, I laughed, the sound harsh in the quiet room. You might want to check your email. About an hour ago, someone sent him copies of all the evidence in our divorce case, along with information about his pattern of seducing and discarding business partners. Apparently, Henderson and Associates takes a dim view of employees who create legal liabilities for the firm. The color drained from her face completely. Now, what are you saying? I'm saying Scott Randall cleaned out his office and left town this afternoon. Didn't even leave a forwarding address. The lie came easily, smoothly, delivered with just enough detail to be believable. In reality, Scott was probably at his apartment planning damage control strategies with Marissa, but she didn't know that. And in her current state of panic, she was ready to believe the worst. That's not possible. He loves me. He loved your connections and your money. Now that both are gone, so is he. Marissa pulled out her phone with shaking hands, frantically dialing Scott's number. It went straight to voicemail. Not because he'd fled town, but because I'd used a simple cell phone jammer I'd bought online to block signals in the immediate area. Scott, it's me, she said to his voicemail, her voice breaking. Please call me back. I need to know you're okay, that we're okay. I love you. She tried calling 3 more times, each attempt growing more desperate. By the 4th try, she was crying. He's gone, she whispered, more to herself than to me. Did you really think it would end any other way? Did you honestly believe a man who cheats with married women was going to be faithful to you? She looked up at me then, and for a moment I saw the woman I'd married 22 years ago. Vulnerable, scared, realizing she'd made a terrible mistake. If she'd apologized, then if she'd shown even a hint of genuine remorse, I might have softened. Instead, she attacked. This is all your fault, she screamed, jumping to her feet. "If you'd been a better husband, if you'd given me what I needed, none of this would have happened." "And what did you need, Marissa?" "More money, a bigger house, a husband who looked better at cocktail parties. I needed a partner. I needed someone who understood my ambitions, who wanted to build something meaningful instead of just existing. I worked 60-hour weeks to put you through architecture school. I supported every career move you made, even when it meant sacrificing my own opportunities. I celebrated every success and comforted you through every failure." My voice was getting louder now. 22 years of suppressed resentment finally finding its voice. "What I didn't do was read your mind and anticipate that you'd decided I wasn't good enough for the life you wanted. You were holding me back. I was loving you, but apparently that wasn't enough." The fight went out of her again, replaced by something that looked almost like grief. She sank back into the chair, her perfect facade finally cracking completely. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "Now you find a place to stay and a lawyer who specializes in damage control. You try to rebuild your career and your reputation from whatever pieces are left after this is over. And you learn to live with the consequences of your choices, and us. There is no us. There hasn't been for months, maybe years. The only difference is now it's official." I walked to the front door and held it open, a clear invitation for her to leave. She gathered her purse and the legal papers, moving like someone in a daze. At the threshold, she turned back to me one last time. "I did love you, you know, in the beginning, I know. I loved you too, all the way to the end." She walked to her car without looking back, her heels clicking on the driveway like a countdown timer reaching 0. I watched her drive away, then closed the door and turned off the cell phone jammer. My phone immediately buzzed with missed calls and text messages. Scott frantically trying to reach me after his calls to Marissa had failed. Lindsay wanting to know if I was okay. Dave Morrison reporting that he'd successfully served papers on Scott as well, but I ignored them all and poured myself a bourbon, sitting in my recliner and savoring the silence of my empty house. The revenge was complete. Marissa's reputation was destroyed, her assets frozen, her lover exposed as a serial predator, her family turned against her. She would survive. People like her always did, but she would never again underestimate the man she dismissed as boring and reliable. As for me, I was finally free. Free from the lies, the pretense, the slow poison of a marriage that had died years ago. Free to discover who I was when I wasn't trying to be the man Marissa wanted me to be. My phone rang. Lindsay's name on the caller ID. "It's over," I said when I answered. "Are you okay?" "Better than I've been in years." "She's at my apartment. She's broken, John. Completely broken. Good. She keeps asking about Scott, why he won't answer her calls." I smiled, remembering the cell phone jammer and the carefully constructed lie about Scott fleeing town. Maybe his feelings weren't as strong as she thought. Maybe not. Lindsay paused. "What about us? What happens between us now?" It was a good question. With Marissa out of the picture, Lindsay and I were free to explore whatever was building between us. But it would have to wait until the dust settled. Until we could be sure our feelings were real and not just a reaction to the chaos of the divorce. Now we take things slow and see what develops. No rush, no pressure, just possibility. I'd like that. So would I. After we hung up, I sat in the gathering darkness of my living room thinking about the future for the first time in months. It was uncertain, unplanned, full of variables I couldn't control, but it was mine. And that made all the difference.